Our guest today is my good friend, Sanjay Shirodkar of DLA Piper. Sanjay and I worked together at the SEC in Corp Fin many moons ago. He's a wonderkind. He's a disclosure drafter. Today, he's going to teach us some tips today on realtransparentdisclosure.com. All right, Sanjay, I always feel like you're right behind me because I remember when I moved out of the chief counsel's office in Corp Fin and went to work for a commissioner. Not only did you join the office of chief counsel at that point, but you literally came into my messy office and took over that office. Although hopefully I didn't leave you any presence.
No, no, no. It was all a wonderful transition, as you well know. It was a great time to be there.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend who just left Corp Fin, and I had totally forgot when people moved offices because what happens is someone leaves the SEC and they've been there a long time. They've accumulated some nice furniture, the older furniture, the furniture that's decades old in a government agency usually is really nice wood and has real glass, and those are coveted pieces. And apparently there's movers that work for the SEC that help people move offices. But I guess I just don't remember, even though I did move a few times, taking advantage of that. I don't, do you remember that?
I don't think we had that, Brock. I mean, we were also off the GS scale at one time, remember? Like,
Oh yeah.
those were a few years ago. And I think I still remember like getting emails and all the technology that we had. And I remember like thinking how fortunate we were to have this nice technology. So for me, those were some fond memories that I had from way back when.
Yeah, I just don't remember the movers. But
Yeah.
the movers would not know much about disclosure, even though they work for the SEC. And of course, there's a lot of staffers that don't know about disclosure because they're in the other divisions. So let's talk about disclosure because you've been out of the SEC now quite a while and you've been helping clients, companies draft disclosure. What is your typical process when you're helping a company draft disclosure to improve it?
Yeah, so what we'll talk about is a twofold. Okay, we'll talk about existing clients first, and then we'll talk briefly about new clients. So one of the things that I discovered through my travels is that if you're thinking about disclosure and you have the periodic report sitting on your desk, it's really too late. So one of the things that I have done for our clients, and these are mostly large cap companies that we work with, is we do a continuous review. So we have like three different things that we do for our large company clients. I have something called a daily news report. So every day I get an alert, like one of these automated alerts, right, for that company and its peer companies that I have curated based on topics that are relevant. So my team gets a daily alert that says these are the things that are happening today. The second thing is we do continuous benchmarking. So again, right now it's a challenging time for many companies, for example, right? And so rather than waiting till, hey, the queue comes in and then we have to adjust the risk factor on tariffs or anything like that, what we try to do is we try to do continuous benchmarking through the year so that the 3, 4, 5 topics that are most relevant, we're looking at peer group disclosure, at developments in different things. And also we get a chance to work with some of our other SMEs, subject matter experts, on topics. For example, we have a great, tariff team. So it's a great opportunity to have a touch point with a client during the quarter before the queue comes in. So you can say, hey, look, have you thought about this issue? And let me tell you some of these subject matters experts who can sort of help you sort of think through the issue so that you're not being reactive to disclosure, rather you're being proactive in the disclosure that you see. The third thing that we also do with many of our large clients is because we're tracking these two issues through the quarter, I have quarterly calls before I see the queue or the earnings material with the client to say, hey, these are the 5 topics, these are the 10 topics that we think are relevant. We want to have a discussion with your team, not just the disclosure team, but also subject matter experts at the company, so that we are aware of what the company's position is on these 3 to 5 topics, so that when we see the disclosure, it's not, oh my God, now I have to change it. We've already thought of the disclosure. We know what we're going to say, and we work collaboratively with the company so that when we see the disclosure, it's already crafted in a way that we don't have to do major surgery to that disclosure. And so go ahead, Mark.
No, I'm great.
So that's with large cap companies, right? With other smaller cap companies, we do the normal stuff, right? Look at the press releases, 8Ks, law firm blogs. anything SEC guidance that comes along. I mean, those are basic table stakes, right? So this is how we sort of differentiate our disclosure team from many of our peer groups because we take a much more proactive approach in drafting disclosures for our public companies clients.
And what you're doing is not easy because when I was in-house at Lockheed Martin, which at the time was a Fortune 40 company, I'm not sure where they fall in the tables these days. But when we go, they had a lunchroom and you go down to lunch and they would Xerox the news in media publications about the company that just came out in the last day. And it was like yay thick. It took me half of the lunch period just to thumb through it and keep up. Because Lockheed basically had 5 lines of business. So it was in essence a conglomeration of 5 sizable companies. So just keeping up with the developments for one company would be a massive undertaking. Doing so with multiple clients, I imagine that is difficult to do.
It is, but this is mostly for the large cap companies, right? So it's kind of nice because having continuous data points throughout the quarter and having the conversations with the client as necessary as things develop, it makes life easier because I found that changing disclosure is more difficult than crafting disclosure because once we see the draft on our table, to change it and to have the discussion as to why are you doing this, not that, because the client's already thought about it. They've had 100 people look at that queue by the time it lands to your table. So if you're proactive, you have an opportunity to sort of craft that disclosure and be part of the disclosure rather than saying, oh, I want to change this because A, B, and C, which is always, I find, a little bit more difficult.
Let's talk about what might be sort of a nebulous concept. What do you consider to be good disclosure?
So good disclosure, in my opinion, is a balancing act, right? Again, it's a balancing act that stands the course of time. It's not just snapshot that you can say, okay, today I'm disclosing this, tomorrow I'm going to change the disclosure. And again, that's something that you've talked a lot about on your blog, as far as the transparency, right? And transparency is key because transparency goes not only just to the message that you send out to the particular company and its investors, but it's also the investor relations team, right? We find that our disclosure needs to stand the time of legal, and also IR because that's a balancing act sometimes that comes in. So good disclosure depends upon a company's risk tolerance, but again, some disclosure that stands the test of time so that I'm not changing disclosure. And of course, as some of our clients have complicated matters, so it's important to sort of think through the issue before it becomes an issue. And that goes also to the first point that we're having conversations with some of our clients. We say, okay, well, what about this? We're thinking about topics before they become a disclosure topic.
And what might be an example of a positive outcome that a company experienced based on good disclosure that was drafted?
So some of our clients, obviously face regulatory issues that are complicated. And, my favorite, something that, our good friend Mark Kohler used to talk about, is accounting issues, right? So one of the things that when I was at the SEC, my special counsel was somebody that was close friends with you, Mark Kohler. He always told me that, when you get a Q or a K, yeah, legal disclosure is good, but take a look at the financial statements and the financial statement footnotes. So one of the things that I try to do because of my accounting background is I understand the financial statements, I understand the financial footnotes. And that's where I then find some of the key things to sort of figure out, okay, what's happening with this accounting issue? Is there an impairment that might be coming down the road? And if the impairment is coming down the road, for example, how do we make sure that we leave breadcrumbs today so that a year from now, when the company has to perhaps take an impairment, that we have already covered it so that we can point backwards and say, well, these are the breadcrumbs that we left that were pointing up to this one issue that has occurred down the road.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's such a fundamental thing that I forget that newbies might not be aware of that, looking at the notes to the financials is such a key thing. And having a rapport with the accountants so that you can, if the note for some reason isn't clear enough to you, or you want to get behind what is said there, because they are pretty careful about how they word things in the notes and what goes in it. So there's a lot probably on the cutting room floor that they didn't put in the note that maybe there was a debate about, or that it wasn't policy to put it in the note, but maybe that's something you should understand and know about because it could be a known trend or uncertainty that belongs in the MD&A as a potential trend too. So how do you celebrate good disclosure, or do you celebrate when you've helped draft a piece of good disclosure?
So that's sort of a tricky point, right? Because if disclosure is drafted well, nothing happens. So how do you celebrate nothing happening, right? And so it happens like, again, let's go back to the accounting issue that we're talking about. Like if there is a restatement or if there's a material impairment that occurs, and you've prepared the client, prepared the risk factors, prepared the FLS, prepared the MD&A correctly, then there's no litigation. Sometimes there is litigation, but of course, the key thing is to balance things out so that when an event does occur, it's a non-event. So for me, to be honest, a non-event is the way I celebrate good disclosure.
That's oh man, I was planning on asking this question to everyone I interviewed, and now you've blown it wide open because you're right. And it's true. Lawyers never get to celebrate. I mean, maybe on your deathbed, you'll be like, oh, well, my reputation's intact. Congratulations to myself.
Yeah.
That really is a great point, Sanjay. I was just talking to someone so I joined the SEC a little bit before you, but when I joined in 88, there had been this market break in 1987. There was the single largest point drop in the Dow. And on the year anniversary of that, the SEC had a keg party to celebrate. They actually had a party at a bar where they bought like 20 kegs. And, I'm in my 20s and like out of law school. I was like, oh, this is going to be a regular thing. Parties hosted by the SEC. And I think that's the only, well, other than, the holiday parties. But in terms of having a keg party at a bar, it's hard to believe. And to celebrate a market crash, I mean, that the
Right.
market quickly recovered, but it was such
Right.
a funny thing. So there
Yeah.
was one celebrate. I guess I celebrated on the front end of my career, and then now it's over.
Well, we also had going away parties that you were talking about the other day.
Yeah.
Right. And those are always a special occasion to hear from management and to hear from your peer group. And I remember those plaques that we used to get where everybody used to sign in. And I still have my plaque in my office, and I still look at all the names and the different messages that people had talked about.
Oh
And
yeah.
so it was a nice, there you go. That's the one that I'm talking about.
The
Yeah,
signing board. Yeah.
yeah, the signing board. Exactly. Right.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
Thank you so much. That was awesome, Sanjay. And we'll talk to you again.
You got it. Thank you so much. Talk soon.